My name is Yisrael Kuchar. I manage product management here at Exlibris. Specifically today, we're going to be talking about Primo VE, a bit about what it is, what we gain from it, a bit of a commotion outside, sorry for that, and hopefully leave as much time as we can to actually tie the theory together with a bit of a demo. So let's get right into it. So Primo VE. So again, it going back again quite a few years. We've had Primo around for 10 or 12 years already. Again, exposing the library collections, again, whether ILS or electronic or digital, to the end user, and entering Alma probably about 5 or 6 years ago, where they were always written and designed to work together. A few years ago, we announced a project to actually start bringing them even closer together. The first and most basic piece was to actually have the discovery, have Primo managed from within the Alma menus as well. So if traditionally we had the Primo back office and we had Alma that replaced a bunch of other systems in the library, it made sense to have Primo managed from within the menus as well. Again, making it easier to manage, having one kind of language of flow to work with, as opposed to a separate and kind of different management language. That was kind of the basics of it, but obviously that's not the core. What we really went into looking at doing is looking at the different areas today where we have duplicate efforts and processes between Alma and Primo together. So for example, setting up a scope in Primo, so deciding that you want to search the music library or the main library, what that entails. Primo doesn't even know what the library is. You had to go, even though you have that all designed and set up in Alma, you have your whole structure set up there, you had to go and tell Primo what your libraries were. You had to tell Primo what your IP ranges are. You had to set up authentication twice, and that's just in regards to setup. But beyond just the setup, we wanted to obviously use and reuse as much of the setup once, but also use it for functionality. So if we wanted to say, let me search across all the records that are in the music library, let's do it in a much easier way, and not having to tell Primo, okay, any record that gets loaded and has this specific code, that's the music library, let's group those together so we can search them. So again, making it much simpler to work with. Moving kind of with these bullets, the next big thing we wanted to look at was the publishing process. The publishing process is kind of something that was pretty much the same across all discovery systems, again, from the invention of discovery system, where the discovery system had to get the records from the source system, whatever the source system was, Alma in our case, and it was, again, pushed out once a day, twice a day, once a week, whatever was relevant, picked up, loaded into the discovery system and indexed. We wanted to completely break that paradigm and basically let Primo read directly from the Alma database. So as opposed to having Alma publish records and loading it into Primo, again, once a day, twice a day, and having them hopefully ready by the next morning for the end users, we're going to let Primo read directly from the Alma database, and when a record is loaded or changed in Alma, we want it exposed as fast as possible to the end user. And this brings us to real-time discovery. So basically, again, we've completely gone away with this need to loading the data and publishing the data. We're in essence, again, they were both in the Exlibris cloud. So we were basically taking your records that you just cataloged from the left-hand side of our data center to a server on the right-hand side of the data center where Primo was. And again, we cut this completely. Again, in many levels, we want to do this. One, obviously, was the time it takes from when you catalog or update the record until it's exposed to the end user. The other side of it is how many processes and how many different elements are happening that you as an sysadmin, whether on the Alma side or the Primo side or both, need to maintain and make sure that things happened on time. So you have to make sure that, again, all the records that were saved were now published on time from Alma. They were sent via FTP or SFTP or OAI or whatever method, and picked up on the Primo side, loaded in, indexed, and so on. So we wanted to cut that completely. And just in general, I mean, it's also, there's some computer power here that we needed to maintain this all. And again, by simplifying it, making a lot less room for error and for network errors and things like that. So what we have now is that for records that are managed in Alma, whether print, electronic, or digital, any changes that you make to existing records is seen immediately. Anything that is requires the index to run, so a brand new record that was loaded or cataloged into Alma, will be seen within about 15 minutes, often even less, but up to 15 minutes it will be seen in Primo. That's 1.5, not 5.0. Moving kind of to the lower side of the list here is, in general, once we had this opportunity to basically rewrite the Primo back office into Alma menus, we really looked at improving the implementation process. And this is not just about implementing new customers and onboarding new Primo and Alma customers, although that as well has been cut down a lot. But really implementing any functionality, whether it's an existing functionality that you've never activated or whether it's a new functionality that we're shipping out, we basically took the opportunity to look at the way things are done and try to make them very, very simple to do, very task-oriented. Again, some features are basically, one-click activate or deactivate. Other functionalities obviously might need some more configuration, depend on their nature, but to make it much, much simpler. I will show you, once we get to the demo, a few of these things, but just as an example, the example I said before, I want to create a search scope to search only the music library, right? I want to allow my end user to search across everything or only a specific a subset, which could be based on library or location or again different elements as well. So again, in Primo we had to actually teach Primo what these elements were, and then we had to reload the data and re-index the data. Again, if you had a lot of data, that could take quite a lot of time. In Primo VE, we wanted to make this as simple as possible and basically allow you to define that rule or that logic of what you want to search, and again, it's searchable immediately. And just in general, we took the whole area of the menus and made it much, much simpler than it was before. And last but not least is the move to monthly releases. Again, since Primo VE is sitting on the Alma platform, it was critical for us to be completely synced with the Alma releases. This allows us to, again, if things change in Alma or things change in Primo VE, again, they can change within the release. They don't break each other. We're not relying on the two different systems to start sending APIs. It's sitting on the same platform. What it allows us is to be much, much faster on our feet in regards to shipping out fixes if needed, reacting to what we're seeing that customers need and bringing out new features. Again, coming out synced with Alma on a monthly basis. So Primo VE is released with Alma, so the first Sunday of every month on production, and 2 weeks prior to that, it's released on Sandbox for sites to start testing. Okay, and I know I'm talking very high level. We'll kind of drill down and tie it in with the demo as well. So this is a slide that you've probably seen, many of you have seen a long time ago. It's an old slide kind of describing the move from discovery over multiple different systems and elements in the library to Primo and Alma. And what we're talking about here in Primo VE is basically this move. We're still talking about Primo when we're still talking about Alma. They're still separate systems. They're designed to do separate things. The index that the staff use in the staff search in Alma is different than the index that is used in Primo. Again, the end user looks at things from a slightly different perspective than staff, obviously. In regards to hardware perspective, again, there are separate servers for Primo and for Alma, and they are more tightly integrated, again, as a platform. And again, Primo can read, as I said, directly from the Alma database, so we don't need that whole loading and publishing process. And a lot of elements, we'll talk about them soon as well, are much more reachable for Primo to get that information from Alma than it ever was before. So if we're looking at kind of the areas where we started looking at different features with Primo VE, so one of them, and when we spoke about quite a few of these, were on the admin side of things. So make it much simpler to manage, to maintain, to set up new features, and so on. So again, to reduce the duplicate setup as much as possible, things like defining campuses and IPs and libraries and authentication and so on, and the whole publishing and loading process. The other side of this is the end user side of things. Again, we're allowing much more accurate discovery. So the very basic of it is the fact that we have real-time discovery from when you catalog. So if we have a user that's now searching for a record or a collection or something that was, again, cataloged very recently or today in Alma, he's going to find those records as opposed to perhaps if these records weren't published and seen it in the discovery side of things, then he might, not find what he wants and not come back tomorrow. I think the stronger side is on the negative side of things. If you have a book or a collection or journal and so on that was lost or that you no longer subscribe to, in traditional terms, again, once you've decided on Alma to remove this record or delete or basically suppress or define that it's not relevant for discovery anymore, it still takes that time to be loaded again and removed from the discovery system. And in that time, if the user is searching for something and they find it, but then they actually hit the dead end because it's actually lost, we don't subscribe to it anymore, that's where they lose, where they might lose the faith, and we definitely want them to get as accurate information and find the things that are relevant for them as much as possible. Just in general, because we've simplified this whole area, it's much more fully synced. There are a lot less moving parts, that a lot less room for things not to kind of sync up and work, and network latency, and again, whatever systems might have that kind of don't meet up when the Alma side published and the Primo side didn't pick up. Again, it's much simpler, a lot less room for these type of errors. Other things are data elements for search and display, for example, local fields. We'll take a look at that in the demo as well. These are made available immediately. If you want to now expose your 540 field, whatever it is, the notes, either they're cataloged now, or they've always been cataloged but you never exposed them, you can set that up and see it immediately in Primo. You don't need to rerun or reload any of the data. Configuration changes, so changes to your view, adding elements and things like that, you make the change, you see it immediately in Primo. There's no need to deploy or to wait wait for any processes to happen. Now, as we were going along, more and more features, again, by utilizing the Alma platform and utilizing the information already, more and more features come up. Some of these features are features that we are thinking of as we go along. Some of them we kind of marked at day one that we want to get to. Some of these features are features that come back from feedback that we're getting from our existing customers. So for example, linking between Alma and Primo. So we'll show that in a second, but from the staff search, if the staff member finds a record, they can click on the buttons and see what this record looks like in Primo. the fact that you manage both your electronic and your print in Alma means we can more easily always check if we also have a print version. So we can find an article, again, in Primo Central, in Google Scholar, or doesn't matter exactly what the source of the record is, we can always, as opposed to link resolvers, which always gave you the electronic information, we can always check now and see if there's always physical. And there's quite a few other features in this area as well. Again, we'll try and show some of these in the demo. So Primo VE uses the new Primo UI. Again, it's already not so new anymore, but it's still called the new UI as opposed to the classic UI. It's the exact same code, the exact same UI, so anything that you may have heard in regards to customization, to things that you can do, add-ons, the Primo Studio that's coming up, all of these are relevant here as well. Any existing sites that already have new UI and have customization, if they move to Primo VE, you can just take that customization and it works the same. The one difference, for those of you who are familiar with Primo-Alma today, the one difference is the locations area. The locations, the get it and the view it area, which in Primo is a mashup coming from Alma. In Primo VE, it's a part of the page itself. So if you decide to customize the page and change the fonts or the color, this area gets affected as well. You don't need to go and do that on the Alma side to kind of align it with what you've done on the Primo side. But other than that, it's basically the exact same UI, those of you who are familiar with it. In regards to rollout, some of you may have heard some of this already, but basically 2017 was the year that we were working with early adopters and development partners. So our first customer, we're working with a few development partners. Our first customer went live, that was University of Western Australia. They went live in February of last year. So they've been live for a year and a half now. So they went live for the beginning of their semester. Our second early adopter was Colorado School of Mines. They went live in June for the beginning of their semester last year. And then we had quite a few other early adopters throughout 2017. 2018 was defined that all new Alma Primo customers, so all new projects that are implementing both Alma and Primo, are implementing Primo VE. And for existing customers, again, we'll talk specifically about existing customers a bit later on. But basically, from the middle of the year, so from about now or a few months ago, we have sites that have approached us and asked to move to Primo VE. We'll talk a bit about what that means in a few slides. So a year ago, we had one live customer, as I said, was UWA. We had Colorado School of Mines that were going live end of June, beginning of July, and a few others were about to go live. Today, we have 55 live customers, over 100 institutions in implementation, including consortia, including different flavors of consortia. And again, quite a lot more actually about to go live now before the beginning of the fall semester. Just a couple quick things that are coming up. Again, some of these I've already mentioned. So we're working on consortia. We'll talk specifically about consortia in a second. The enhanced Primo REST API suite, so the new Primo REST suite that came out, or a few APIs were already made public. So again, Primo VE is adopting these new REST APIs as well. We're adding definitions for controlling the hyperlinks of display fields. So again, you can decide out of the box. We have a few display fields which are hyperlinked, and again, we'll search for that value across the library. So typically out of the box, it's things like author, creator, and subject. But we're adding the ability to be able to basically generate any links to search and to link between records. And we're adding normalization rules for display. So you'll be able to write the normalization rule. So if we, out the box, have our title coming from 245 A and B, and again, this is just an example. We have it all documented. And we have libraries we know that want to also add the subfield C. And again, in Primo, you had to write a rule and reload your data and so on. What we're developing now is to allow libraries to basically, if they want to a specific element, a specific field, not to use our out-the-box routines, to basically disconnect that specific field, or in our case, it would be the title, and write their own routines. And without running any processes or running any reloads, basically every time that we display the records, whether in the brief display or the full display, we would then go and use the routine that they wrote as opposed to using our out-the-box routine. So again, writing a rule and seeing it immediately. And again, enriching the way we work with custom facets and local fields as well. And again, these are just a few of the things. Specifically, Consortia. So as I said, from the beginning of the year, all new sites are implementing Primo VE, and this includes a Consortia as well. We're actively working with 2 Consortia early adopters. One is WRLC, which are going live in a few weeks, and one is MNPALs, which are in the middle of their project. And just in general, and I'll leave this very, very high level at this stage, but the same principles remain. So we wanted to keep it as simple as possible and seamless publishing and so on. The metadata management is depending on their Alma setup, whether they have central cataloging with or linked records or local records. Again, that doesn't change. Whatever they do in Alma, we can support. Each institution can decide to search whether themselves or search the whole network, or both of them together. And again, these are things that we want to allow. Again, each institution. The one thing that I think is kind of it continues what I said before about this display normalization, as opposed to now where a lot of consortia need to define normalization rules together, and any change that they do affects each other, and they have to have a committee and decide what to change. This display normalization that I mentioned before can be set up per institution. So each institution with its own interface and view can decide exactly how they want to display some of the things, and they don't need the whole consortia to agree, because they don't necessarily affect each other when they're searching their own interface. As before, the normalization rules were on the data itself, so it was affecting everyone. These are a few things in regards to consortia. A bit about existing Primo-Alma sites that I mentioned before. So we have the delivery team here at the headquarters. They're working now with 15. I think this number is actually not up to date. I think there are a few more. There are already, I believe, 6 or 7 sites that were existing Primo sites that have worked with the delivery team and decided to go live and move forward with Primo VE. Basically, the way it works is, again, this delivery team has a kind of a mini project with the library. Primo VE is basically enabled on production completely in parallel to the existing Primo-Alma. So again, all the staff that use Alma are not affected. It's role-based, so only those specific staff members that are involved in this project will see the Primo VE menus. All the rest continue to work with Alma as they had before. The existing Primo, which is in production and all the patrons are using, is not affected either. Alma keeps publishing, the communication keeps working, and basically Primo VE has its own menus and it has its own URL on the side for that period of testing. And again, once the library is ready, all we need to do is move the patrons from using the from pointing to the classic traditional Primo to Primo VE. So basically what's happening now is the delivery team is working with quite a few early adopters and basically building tools and methods. Some of them will be automated, some will be semi-automated to move customers. We have also published a document for existing customers that might be interested on the documentation center. In general, if there are any sites out there that want to actually start the project, they can contact the delivery team to see about actually starting such a discussion and going into such a project. This year, we're not making anyone move. There is, again, it's completely opt-in for sites that are interested in. Primo, as you know, it is continuing development, continuing roadmap. Again, there are sites that are not ready for this at this stage or that stage. That's completely fine. There's more information available in the Knowledge Center. So under Primo documentation and Primo training, there is quite a lot of documentation and training. It's monthly releases, so it gets updated quite often. You can see the information under the release notes for Primo VE as well. As I said, it's monthly, so quite a lot of stuff is happening there quite often. Okay. Okay. With that, let's move to actually the we'll move actually to the demo side of things, and again try to tie some of this theory together. Let me just see if there's any quick questions before we move to the demo itself.
Yeah, there's one question. You said Alma and Primo indexes are separate. Where can customers modify the indexes? We have a custom local keyword index for series. Browse indexing is important to us also.
Okay. So yeah, we're trying to reuse as many pieces and elements as possible. So for example, browse, we use a lot of the browse elements that are already in Alma for staff search. We expose them for end users. I'll show some of the things that we can, also some examples of affecting the index and working with local fields. In general, again, quite a lot of the things are feedback that we're getting from customers and things that should be indexed for all customers. We're doing for all customers. So, for example, we looked at when we started, we looked at what quite a lot of sites were doing that we did not have out the box. For example, the whole area of course reserves. We had many sites that manually went in and created the facets for course information, whether the course code, course name, course instructor, again, both for display and facet. So we added those out the box, so we don't need everyone to go and reinvent the wheel. We saw that we had a lot of sites that created a facet and a display field for mesh subjects. So as opposed to having everyone reinvent the wheel, we added those out the box. We saw sites added the geographic subject, so the place from the subject area. So we added that as a facet out the box. And again, more and more information and feedback that we're getting from customers, we would rather see what we can do to add once for everyone, as opposed to, again, have everyone redo. Obviously, things like local feeds, for example, there were no rules. That's why we had to specifically allow, from day one, allow people to do local fields, to do anything they want to do with local fields, because local fields, obviously, everyone is different. There's a question here about external content, which again is a good question. What we're talking about here was mainly about Alma data and exposing it into Primo. Yes, we obviously a lot of the data that our different libraries have is data that's managed outside of Alma, so in digital repositories, DSpace, Fedora, and again, different types of repositories. Most commonly Dublin Core by OAI, but not necessarily. So again, that data is loaded into Primo VE, similar to the way it was in Primo. So basically, we need that source system to export the data, again, via OAI sets or FTP. We would load that data in, again, as Dublin Core or as XML. We would, normalize things if we need to, and have them exposed in Primo as well. So that perspective of it is quite similar to the way that it was in Primo as well. Okay, let's jump quickly to the demo. No, the external data is not indexed in the Alma indexes. For that, you would need Alma-D. So sites that have Alma-D, it's seen in Alma as well, and then seen in Primo VE. Sites that want to load the data directly into Primo, it's only in Primo as it is today. Okay, let me just jump here and bring my screen here. Okay, I hope everyone can see my my screen.
Yep.
Great. Okay, so to those of you who are less familiar, this is Alma. This is my my Alma environment. I'm signed in now with a user that Alma is role-based, so I have specific roles. My user doesn't have all the roles. It has this role called Discovery Admin, and it has quite a few other roles as well, but not everything. So we've got this discovery menu. So those of you who have Alma today would not see this. This is the Primo menu, and if I go kind of to the configuration area, again, you can see that I don't have all the areas that that some Alma users might have. Again, just because of the roles I defined, I do have this discovery area. So I want to show you a few things. I'll start with the search profile because I mentioned that before. So in regards to the example where I want to create, and again, please disregard the mess I have here. I've got quite a few people demoing here. But if I want to create a search profile, which is what we're calling the search scope, I want to allow my end users to search only the music library, for example. So let's call it music, or let's say music library. Again, this is just the code that we're going to use in the system, and it's going to be my music library. From within here, if I have an interface that is in multiple languages, I can translate it from within here to the different languages that I have. And I want to add the actual search scope. So again, what we try to do is the most common scopes that people have, to have them very, very simple to add. So things like campuses. So I can, again, very easily create a search scope on a campus level or library or so on. So on campus, I can see, again, since I'm sitting on the Alma infrastructure, I know that there are 3 campuses set up, and I can basically set up a scope for the Uptown campus and go and use it straight away and basically search everything that is in the Uptown campus. In our case, we wanted to look at libraries. Again, as opposed to Primo, where you had to teach Primo what the music library was, here I've got a list of all my libraries, and I can say, okay, let's search the music library, and say add and close, and I've basically created a search scope for the music library. I can now go and apply this into any views. I can have multiple views. I can have a separate view for the music library than the rest of the libraries, or have it kind of as a subset within that. So I can go and reuse this. Again, I don't need to load any data or touch any data. I can have the library, the music library, with also central index as an example. Let's say add and close. I've now created a search scope that is my music library and the central index and Primo Central. And again, I can go and search it straight away. Now we try to keep this as simple as possible here. We do recognize that there are some sites that want to have more complex rules. So what we did is we put these under this custom scope area, because again, the 80% of the sites, these elements of campus, library, with Primo Central, without Primo Central, are really the building blocks they need. If I want to create a custom local scope, let's create one here. I can create one which is again a more complex rule. Let's again, we'll give it a code and name later. But let's say we want to, we can use different elements which are either inventory elements, local field elements, or metadata elements. So in inventory, I can use different elements such as give me everything that is available digital or anything that is available physical. Is associated with a course, is associated to a specific library, and so on. Let's create something that is based on a location. So I want to search across records that are in the music library stacks. And I want to create an additional condition to say that I want these to be in, let's find the languages, many languages here. I don't even know half of these, but let's say French. And I want the logic between them to be in and I've basically added a condition that will say, okay, I'm going to be searching everything that is in the music library stacks and is also French, and I can create, again, I don't have to rerun or reload any data. Basically what's happening is we move this scope section to, as opposed to tagging the data like we did before, to runtime. So whenever I'm going to be searching something in my view, it's going to be also searching and also make sure that it's part of the music library stack location and that the language is French. So this is going to be my French music stacks. Again, this is just a code. Stacks. And we'll call it now French music. And save. And I can go and use that. And again, because we know what our libraries are, we know what our campuses are, we can already allow the users very easily to set these up. I'll jump to a couple other things, and we'll look at them in a second as well from the end user perspective. Let's look at the local field, which I mentioned before. So I've got a few local fields set up here. I have 50 local fields that I can use. And as opposed to Primo, where you had to set up display fields and search fields and facet fields, I'll just take this donor note, this local field 10 as an example. And basically I've defined a local field. It doesn't matter which one I used, and I've called it donor note. I can translate it if I want to. I can create a facet out of it if I want to. What I want to do is to have it indexed. So anything that is going to define here for local field 10 can also be searchable. And today what it does is that it allows me to, again, any local field from the 950 is displayed as donor note, and it's also searchable. Let's quickly just add a few other fields as well. Let's add 977 as an example. And let's add, I don't know, 922, 922 field. Again, just a couple other, local fields. 922. Add and save. So 950, 977, and 922. Let's go a second to the Alma side of things, and I want to show you how we kind of put this all together. So I'll go to my Alma, my staff search, and let me just search for a book. Okay, let's look at this book here. Let's look at this book over here as well. So the first thing I want to show you is kind of this link between Alma and Primo. So within the Alma staff search, we added this display in Discovery. And it allows opening this record within Primo. Again, this is useful for the cataloger to see what things look like. It could be useful for for someone who's a patron-facing at the reference desk, who for whatever reason is, finds things easier on the Alma side, but then can show them on the Primo side to the patron. Again, here's the different metadata that we have. I mentioned here before that this getted area is no longer a mashup. It's actually part of the screen itself. So if I sign in quickly, sign in as Fred, we can get request options, and again, it's all part of the interface itself. Let's go a second to the metadata. And I was looking at this record here. Okay, and I want to make a few changes and see them, and I also want to add a few local fields as well. So let's add a field. Let's add a 950 field and say $A, $A over here. And say this book was donated in celebration Okay, let's add that, and let's change a few of the elements here. Let's say it's not 336 pages, but it's 556 pages. What else can we change? It wasn't from Tokyo, but it was actually from Osaka. And there was another one. Let's add a 922 field, because that was another one that we said, 922. And this was the donor's favorite book. And let's just save that record. Okay, let's go back here and just quickly refresh. Okay, so first thing we see is that it's now 556 pages. It was actually published in Osaka and not in Tokyo as it was before. And we see our donor notes as well here. So we see this book was donated in celebration of the birthday, and it was a donor's favorite note. Again, these things traditionally in Primo, or really in whatever system, would typically require reloading the data, re-indexing the data in order to see them, and now we see them immediately. As I mentioned, if it was a new book that was loaded, it would be seen within 10 to 15 minutes. We see here that, again, Primo is integrating nicely, in this case with synthetic sundown, to give us more information about the book or about the author as well. Okay, I wanted to show a couple of other things. I wanted to look at the journal search as an example. So let's take a look here at a customer site as an example. This is in New Mexico State University. And if I go to the journal search, so for the first time, we've basically taken what traditionally is a link resolver functionality, again, commonly known as the journal A to Z, which really was all about e-journals, and it really started off kind of with, you only subscribe to not a huge amount of journals, but a few hundred, a few thousands. But now obviously we've got many thousands of records, both of journal records, both electronic and physical. So the first thing that we wanted to do here was really take advantage of the fact that you're managing both your print and your electronic in Alma, and have this journal be, again, a journal search. So any journal that you as an institution either have holdings for or have electronic subscription for we would find this here. So if we look at, for example, let me just start by typing pediatric. So what we have here is an autocomplete, and as opposed to the regular Primo autocomplete, which also takes information from Primo and from Primo Central and quite a lot of information, this autocomplete here is specifically coming from your journals that each institution holds. So it's structured for each institution, again based either on their physical or electronic journals. So if I say pediatric healthcare as an example, okay, we'll find journals. The other thing that I want to show you here is that we have journals that are both physical and online. So if I, for example, take, again, this is a small amount. Let me just move that aside and type and say chemical and engineering news. Again, we'll find both physical and online, and sometimes it could be a journal that's both physical and online. So really giving you all the journals that you hold. The other thing that I want to show, and I wanted to show it here, is if we go into a journal, what we've added here is this search inside. So first thing, we see both the physical and the online holdings. Again, this is a record that's managed in Alma. Again, that's not big news. Any record that's managed in Alma, it could potentially be electronic or print, or it could be a dedupe of two separate records if you manage separate bibs. And what we added here is this search article. So now I've found a journal that I'm interested in. Let's search for articles within this journal. So if I'm looking again at pediatric healthcare, let's just look at something that a lot of parents can relate to. So I'll just search for chickenpox. And what this is doing is going to generate a search in Primo Central for all the records from this journal with the keyword that I've added in. So we see here that we get both the journal and the article thumbnails from, again, Synthetics or Google. And we got here all the articles, again, that I've searched, again, with the word chickenpox from within that journal. And again, this is a typical record from Primo Central. Primo Central knows to give indication that the record is online, that it's a peer-reviewed journal. What I mentioned before as one of the advantages that we wanted to add in is the fact that we now always want to also check if the record has physical as well. So we knew the record had online. Because we came from the journal, you and I knew that we also have this physical. But basically, no matter where this record came from, this came from Science Direct in our example, we check that, again, we have it online, which is what we knew, and we also can see that we also have it physically. So this is, again, part of that Journal of Pediatric Health, and we've got here all our physical holdings as well. If I sign in, I could perhaps place requests, or again, whatever the library policy might be. If I look at this from also coming from Google Scholar as an example, and I just search for global warming, and again, I've set up my Google Scholar to basically give me services for one of the existing libraries. So I see here this get it at the NPS Knox library, which is an existing Primo VE library. And let me just click here. And again, this is basically regular functionality that has existed since forever with Google Scholar, where basically Google Scholar is sending an open URL to your link resolver. And what is unique here with Primo VE is, again, we got this link resolver page, this services page, and traditionally any link resolver would be able to give you this online availability. But what we have here is the fact that we also checked if by chance we have physically. This is for nature, and nature is actually held in 2 different locations in the libraries. Again, if I would sign in, I would be able to perhaps place requests, but I can see here the physical item, and again, I might decide that I'm actually coming to the library anyway. I want to go, see it on paper, or if for some reason the link to the vendor to the online isn't working, I actually can also go and find it physically in the library as well. And again, this is kind of taking that opportunity that we mentioned before in regards to again, taking advantage of the fact that you're managing both print and electronic. There's a question in the QA. If we perform a general search in Primo for chickenpox, will the search result include the Journal of Pediatric Healthcare as a result? The answer is yes. That if I go back to this example that we were here. So basically, oops, I wanted to go to this one. So basically, what we've done is we've basically just searched for chickenpox as well. I don't know to tell you if, so these are regular Primo Central results. I don't know to tell you if you wouldn't be also using this constraint to also look at the journal, if where these articles will show up, whether these are necessarily the top articles in Primo Central about chickenpox or not. But what we've done is we've searched chickenpox specifically with that journal to find the articles that came from that journal. But all of these are basically, yes, regular Primo Central articles that exist as well. Okay, let's show a couple more things, kind of this taking advantage of the Alma platform, and look at a couple of other things. One of the things that, again, it's functionality that we've had in Primo for a while is the resource recommender configuration, where basically you can allow using different keywords and allowing you to kind of advertise different elements or different databases or libguides to your end users. What we've added in Primo VE is specifically in databases. You already manage a lot of databases in Alma. So as opposed to, let me go back to here, and if I search for medicine. So we have here, we've already set up a database recommender. If someone searches for medicine, then they'll see PubMed. And the elements that you need in order to set this up are basically to give in the keyword that you want people to type, and then what database to recommend, what the database URL might be, what the text might be, and so on. But because we're looking at Alma and you already manage a whole lot of databases in Alma, what we wanted to allow is to see what we can do to make it simpler and not need to redo and retype as many elements. So let me just go here and say I want to add a new database. And I want to add, as opposed to adding a resource. So when I add a resource manually, what typically I need to do is I need to give in all this information in order for it to work. But what I want to do is add resources from electronic collections. So within the electronic collections that I've already subscribed to in Alma, we can say, I don't know, let's say medical, let's find something that's relevant. And again, I'm not sure what databases are activated here on this demo environment, but let's see, let's find something that might be relevant. Let's find, it's finding it because it says medicine somewhere. Let's say nursing. Okay, let's take one of these. So PubMed we already have, but let's say, wait, was it PubMed that we said we have already? Yes, so PubMed we had. let's say this is a relevant. Not finding any good ones here. Let's see what this one is and say we want to bring in this one. Okay, so we've basically selected a database from the databases that I've already subscribed to, and we can add. It gives me already the name of this database as an option, and let's add medical and medicine and nursing. So if the user types in any of these, as opposed to before where I had to actually type in my URL, I can say, if I want to, I can override and type in my URL, but I can also say, just use the URL that already is held in Alma, in the link resolver as well. I can add an image URL and so on, and basically save that. And save that. And now if I search for medicine, it's basically going to allow me multiple databases. So as opposed to before where you had to manually kind of type in or copy in all the databases that you had, again, you can now utilize Alma and find the databases that you subscribe to, and again, use them for generating these tips, these suggested databases. Okay, let me just see. Question here. Question here, are you saying there's sort of a dedupe between Primo Central and Alma local content? Does that work based on identifiers like ISSN? No, it's not a dedupe of records, but it's basically whenever I open a record, no matter where that record came from, I always try and match it up using the Alma resolver. So again, if we look at local Alma records, we don't need to do any matching, right? It's a record. It has a unique identifier, the MMS ID. I know all the information about it. But whenever I get a record that is not held in Alma, so a record that is coming from Primo Central, which is basically just metadata, or a record that's coming from Google Scholar, which again is just metadata, we need to run to Alma anyway, and this is what we've always done to any link resolver, is we ran to that link resolver, in our case Alma, and said, okay, give me all the electronic services that you have for this record. And it used metadata to make that match. Again, if it was ISBN, ISSN, those are probably stronger than just a title and author, but it uses kind of a mix of the metadata elements that are available via OpenURL. So in our case, we use this information, but also enrich it with the physical records as well, the physical holdings for those records as well. I hope that that answers. Are there any other questions? I see we're reaching the top of the hour. Are there any other questions that anyone might have? Please type them into the Q&A. Anyone?
There seems to be no other questions. Do you want to make some concluding remarks?
Sure. I'll sum up, and if a last quick question comes in, we'll try and answer that as well. Okay, so if we're going back to what we started with, to what Primo VE was all about and what it's trying to do. Again, those of you who know Primo kind of can obviously see the big difference. But even those of you who are not familiar with Primo, what we're trying to do here is make it very, very easy to set up. Setting up Primo with Alma now really is, again, a matter of minutes. Any changes that you do, you can make the changes, whether the data changes or configuration changes, see them immediately. If you need to go and fix them, you can go and fix them immediately. You don't need any more long processes of, making changes, loading and indexing, and then discovering that, wait a second, that's not exactly what I had in mind. It's much easier and streamlined, especially again throughout the different areas in Alma and over the Alma data itself.
We did get one more question in, and they want to know, how does the cost compare to just normal Primo?
There is no difference. This is basically Primo. It's a new deployment of Primo. There's no difference in costs for purchasing, and there's no cost for existing sites that wish to move to Primo VE.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Yisrael, and thank you very much, everybody, for attending today's session. We will make the recording available to you, so just stay tuned for that. Thank you very much, and everybody have a pleasant day.
Thank you very much.